Motorists are not switching to electric cars because they cost too much. That's what a new survey says, and that's even as petrol and diesel cars face a ban after 2030. NTD's Patrick Hayden takes a look.
The majority of drivers aren't switching to electric cars because they're too expensive. That's what a new study by the AA and the Department of Transport of more than 15,000 motorists shows. It found that 81% of drivers say they find electric cars or EVs too pricey compared to conventional cars. The government is set to ban petrol and diesel cars in less than 9 years. According to the RAC, of the UK's 23 million licensed vehicles, just 80,000 are electric. That's less than 0.5%. Although it's possible to buy low-cost electric cars, drivers prefer to buy the mid-range. Models with longer battery life are currently more expensive, though, compared with their conventional counterparts. The government is giving up to £2,500 to purchase an EV under £35,000, but most mid-range EVs start above this amount. Also, 77% of drivers say they were concerned fully charged EVs won't go as far as a car with a full tank. In order to meet the government's target to ban all petrol and diesel cars, observers say acceleration of EV adoption will need to happen. Patrick Hayden, NTD News, London.
Jaguar Land Rover is halting its production in the UK due to semiconductor shortages. The carmaker says plants in Halewood and Castle Bromwich in England have to stop for a period of time. Its Solihull plant near Birmingham will continue production, and Mercedes maker Daimler is reducing hours of up to 18,500 employees at 2 of its plants in Germany for the same reason. In France, car giant Renault is saying its fourth quarter sales were impacted by the global shortage of chips. And in other news, the US Commission on International Religious Freedom released its annual report for 2020. It says the Chinese regime's human rights abuses could be the worst development of all. NTD's Don Tran has the details.
The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom says religious freedom in China has deteriorated. The commission says the Chinese Communist regime has intensified its persecution of Christians, Muslims, and other spiritual groups. The regime detained millions of Uyghur Muslims in labor camps and has continued its decades-long practice of forcibly removing organs from live Falun Gong practitioners.
It's disgusting. How does this represent the values of the Chinese people? It does not, but it does represent the values of the Chinese Communist Party.
A bipartisan group of lawmakers recently introduced new legislation to stop China's state-sanctioned practice of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience. The bill would allow the U.S. to sanction any individuals and government officials responsible for organ harvesting. USCIRF Commissioner Gary Bowers says the bill is heartening, but that much more needs to be done.
Our own government needs to keep the pressure on in international bodies. We need to keep raising these issues in any bilateral negotiations with the Chinese government, and we need to speak up for the oppressed people living under Chinese communist rule.
As one of his last actions, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo declared the Chinese regime's treatment of Uyghur Muslims genocide. Some researchers have also labeled the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners as genocide. Bauer says the world should keep a close watch on it.
But it's certainly the kind of thing that we've seen in the past where an oppressive government tries in a variety of ways to eliminate a whole group of people, whether it's an ethnic group or a religious group or people that follow a particular philosophy.
The commission urges the U.S. to redesignate China as a country of particular concern and to enforce existing laws to the fullest extent on the Chinese Communist Party. Don Tran, NTD News.
Now, what could be going on behind the continued protests and calls to abolish the police in America? Well, an expert on Marxist groups and their covert influence says racial tensions are being used to spark a revolution in the United States.
Derek Chauvin has been found guilty on all 3 charges, but many groups and individuals are saying this isn't enough. America's law enforcement system is inherently racist and needs to be abolished. As an infamous Marxist saying goes, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. Trevor Loudon is an expert on radical groups and their influence. He says the issue isn't about justice for George Floyd, police brutality, or racism. It's the revolution.
This is a demonization of the United States, and the demonization is there to set this country up for a socialist communist revolution.
And while many people simply wish to see justice upheld, Loudon says others want to start a revolution. And in order for that to happen, the country's institutions need to be abolished.
What you're seeing here is there's a narrative being set up. The goal is to destroy the police, to destroy power structures in America, because you need to destroy those before you can have a revolution.
Loudon listed a number of Marxist organizations that push the narrative of systemic racism in America and advocate for abolishing the police. Some of these either openly support the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, or have connections to it. Loudon says causing division through racial tensions and destroying America's institutions is in the interest of the CCP, and that the regime works behind the scenes with many of these groups to fan the flames. A Minneapolis-based group called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization is openly pro-CCP. It helped organize a number of George Floyd-related protests in 2020 and organized protests for the verdict of the Chauvin trial. The Facebook event co-organized by the organization said if Chauvin is not found guilty, there will be hell to pay, and we will take to the streets in our rage at a system that is incapable of delivering any justice to black people. Once the verdict was announced, the organization credited those who had taken to the streets, followed by this tweet, which clearly states their goals. People will still be marching tonight. As an organization, we see community control as a positive reform before we achieve revolution. Keep organizing. We have a world to win. Certain politicians are also suggesting Chauvin's guilty verdict is not enough. Loudon says that class or interracial struggle has driven numerous revolutions throughout history. Words like equality and justice are used to conceal the true goal of the movements. Loudon urges the unsuspecting Americans aiding this agenda to wake up. He says things will get worse until people see the communist tactics for what they are and stand up against them.
More than a year ago, millions of people shifted to working from home. Now office doors are slowly reopening and some city workers are starting to commute again. NTD's Jane Werrell looks at how offices in the square mile might adapt to life after lockdown.
The City of London, or Londinium as the Romans called it, is traditionally the capital's business district, with 33 times more workers than residents. In the past year, pandemic restrictions have changed the way we work, and the oldest part of London is feeling the impact. And looking to the future, the head of city leasing for the largest commercial real estate services company in the world says COVID has accelerated the shift to the hybrid working model, which combines remote work with time in the office.
There's been quite a long-term shift towards a more hybrid model of working. The demand for the 5-day working week has been reducing for some time. I think COVID has probably got us to a point that we would have got to anyway. We've seen a flight to quality, so people looking for the best buildings, amenity-rich buildings where their staff can collaborate and enjoy coming to the office.
AXA investment managers say 22 Bishopsgate, the newest and tallest skyscraper in the city, has 60% of its office space leased. Meanwhile, Lloyds Bank has said it will reduce its office space by 20% in a move towards flexible working. That's after 77% of its employees said they wanted to continue working from home for 3 or more days per week. It's not the only city institution considering the move to flexible working.
There is a huge focus on giving people the flexibility to re-engage with the working environment on their own terms, as opposed to companies necessarily dictating to people, this is how you do it and you need to come back full time.
Dubitsky says inquiry levels for flexible offices in the city have picked up, but not as fast as expected compared to other parts of central London.
This could be as a result of simple migration of staff into locations easier to commute to, or it could be simply to do with the fact that companies in the City of London want to be very certain about restrictions easing.
For those commuting to the office, they've noticed a little more buzz in the city.
It was sort of like a ghost town. You could move through the streets very easily, very, very little traffic. And now you can see the taxis are moving again. You can see more people are out. The shops are open, and there's just a bit more life and colour and characters coming back into the city.
Being able to do sort of a commute is quite welcome, and it's a nice shift. Both are good, but this is sort of how we're meant to be working, and the city is more relevant because of that, because of the offices that we have here.
It was a shame to see it when it was so quiet and had the soul ripped out of it a little bit. So it's good to be back. A couple of beers at lunch, sat down and had some food. So
as people return to the city, getting the balance of home and office life is a work in progress. Jane Warrell, NTD News, London.
Bankruptcy is threatening many local Parisian shops. It's been hit especially hard by pandemic restrictions that prevent tourism in the country. NTD's France correspondent David Vivez talks to the owner of a beloved chocolate shop.
At 84 years old, Denise Acabo feels full of energy when she works in her shop of 45 years. Here she sells fine chocolates and premium candy. The treats come from all across France, like this chocolate clementine from Corse Island.
When you put it in your mouth, you have to roll it around inside. If you gobble it down in a few seconds, I'm not selling it to you.
Everyone from French presidents to American actors have visited her shop, but the tourists are the most important customers. Tourism is a top economy activity in France, but since the first lockdown last year, many businesses are going bankrupt.
Last year, during the first lockdown, I was earning like €6 a day. One day I got 30 euros. That was a good day. I was just sinking, crying every evening.
The fate of Acabo's shop is uncertain. She's already 2 months late on her rent, and her daughter is pressing her to sell the shop. But she's keeping faith, and her routine goes on. She tells the stories behind the candies to every client, and believes one day American tourists will be back.
The American tourists used to empty my shelves of Cousins de Lyon. They loved it so much.
You have Cousins de Lyon? Yes, I have Cousins de Lyon.
Acabo decorates her shop with presents from visitors. Paris residents also come to comfort her, knowing she needs support.
I come regularly. I like chocolate, and it seems this place has a soul. I feel good when I'm here.
She says the lockdown has changed the face of the French capital.
These are very, very hard times. A lot of shop owners have sold their shops. Something is changing in Paris. I try to tell myself, just live each day as it is. We don't know what's going on.
Some of the restrictive measures will be lifted on May 7th. For Acabo, it's one step closer to the day tourists will return. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Leith.